Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome back to Fronteras, A Changing America. I'm Edmundo Resendez. The Southern New Mexico Diabetes Outreach, or SNMDO, was formed in 1998 by local health professionals and other citizens who are dedicated to help prevent and manage diabetes. Our guest today is Trinidad Jasso, or TJ, who is a registered nurse and a diabetes educator with SNMDO. Today, we'll be discussing how diabetes affects Latinos in the nation, but closer to home, Southern New Mexico. TJ, welcome to Fronteras, A Changing America. And to start out the conversation, there's a headline in diabetes.org that reads, "Diabetes among Hispanics, all are not equal." How is this true?
You know what? I guess it depends on their financial status. Those that are able to get to their providers and get the information right away, then there's others that are not able to, because we see both. And I see more that are not able to when we see them and they say, well, I don't have the resources, I don't have the money, I'm not able to, but yet I've had all the symptoms of diabetes, and they know the symptoms, but they just didn't have those means to be able to seek medical care. So yes, you have the ones that are able to get medical care and get themselves educated and get the help they need. Then we have the ones that are not able to because they're not fortunate enough to be able to afford insurance or get their medications as needed.
We all know that diabetes does not discriminate. It affects all cultures, ethnicities. But in a lot of ways, for the Latino community, it does seem to discriminate in that there's language barriers, there's this kind of issues. How does it discriminate?
You know what? A lot of times they use terminology that a lot of the patients don't understand. They don't understand also the dietary. A lot of times, if you're using the carbohydrates, with los carbohidratos, you would say that, and you would say, explain to them simply that bread, los panes are going to raise your sugar, las frutas, those kind of things, educating them, and then on portion sizes. They can have una manzana chica, not a grandota, those kind of things. I think that's very important to speak in their language also. A lot of times they're from a lot of them don't have the proper education, so they don't understand a lot of the things. What we were talking about, la micladora, their meter, how to read it. I had a patient that was checking her sugars, and all she said, I said, so it's just okay? And she said, oh yeah, I guess I must be, because every morning it says high. And I'm going, no, it's telling you that it's very high. She thought, well, I thought it was very friendly. Mm-hmm. That it was, me estaba saludando, like,
saying hello.
Hello, everything's fine, and it wasn't, and she didn't understand that meter, after a certain number, it was going to be reading high. It would be telling her, your sugar's too high, I can't read it. But she thought it was a very friendly meter, saludando.
Interesting, yeah, well, but I think that's one of the things to discuss is, how do you educate the Latino community to say, here are the appropriate meters to use. Here's when you need to get checked up. Is there education that's going out to especially the lower income communities, mm-hmm. to let them know how they can help themselves through diabetes education?
Yes. I know at the hospital, the diabetes educator and myself, working with Southern New Mexico, a lot of them didn't have the finances to be able to buy a meter, and some of these meters, since they're non-paying insurance, and they don't have insurance, so they can't afford the strips. And if they go buy the strips, they're beyond reach, like $60 for 50 strips, and they say I can't afford it, So we've done research. There's certain brands now that are made that are generic brands that can still check good quality blood sugars, and they're good machines at a very low cost for these patients, because that's what they need. And so we put them in contact with these products, and also some of the pharmacies here, like especially like Walmart, has the $4 program. And so we tell them, look, this is the medication the doctor put you on. This is this medication that you're on. You can get it for $4 for a month, your medication. So there's a lot of programs that are coming out, but we need to also give those resources to these patients. And if they don't come in, a lot of them are out there wandering around, well, yeah, I have diabetes, but I can't afford the strips and all this. And it's not until they see us or go to these health fairs that they realize there are some products out there that are affordable for them. And because before they were beyond them, and so they didn't know how to get them because they were so expensive.
What are some myths or stigmas that exist in the Latino community regarding diabetes?
Well, it's going to hit you, but it's not going to hit me. It hits my brother, hits my sister, and mi cuñado, and all of them. They have it, but I don't have the symptoms of diabetes. But once you sit down with them, they start going, oh, but it wasn't diabetes. I've had patients that they have wounds on their legs, and they say, no, it was diabetes because I got hit. That's how come I have that wound.
It's a wound that is not healing.
Right, it's not healing. And you say, it's your blood sugars. That's how come it's not healing. Because the sugar's out of control. You got an infection in there. Oh, no, but it wasn't that caused it. It wasn't caused by the diabetes.
Is diabetes hereditary?
You know what? Let's put it this way. If you're from the high-risk culture, ethnic group, the chances are that you're going to get it. If your mom had it, your dad, abuelitos, all that family. So if you're from that ethnic group, it just puts you at risk, So like I always, in fact, studies now say that if a spouse has diabetes in the family, chances are that spouse is going to develop diabetes, and you wonder why.
How is that possible?
Because of the lifestyle. Especially if the wife's the cook, well, guess what? You're eating the same food she's making, And so it puts that person at risk now for developing diabetes, especially if they're not using the canola oils and olive oils, those are the good oils. And the Latinos, we use la manteca, we use the lard, because it makes the food taste a lot better.
I just had a conversation with my mom and flour tortillas and how they just taste so much better. And
yes,
I'm thinking to myself, it's not healthy, but
yeah,
older generation.
The older generation,
not thinking that way.
You can make a good healthy tortilla with oil versus the lard, And I grew up in that culture, in Deming and in the rancho. We'd have pigs and all this. My mom made las tortillas with lard and all this, and now I'm going, wow,
But that's just
so
it.
that put me at risk.
It's all so good. It's all so tasty and delicious,
Exactly.
What's so bad about it?
Like they say, if it tastes good, it's bad. Because there's a little story that my kids would go to Deming and they'd say, how come Grandma and Grandpa's frijoles taste so much better? Their food so much better, and yet Mom makes it and it tastes very different because my wife cooks very different, healthy and all this, and they say, Mom doesn't taste like that. And then one day my dad pulled me aside and I said, Dad, what? He says, la manteca, the lard. And so it's cultural, look at all the bizcochitos made out of lard, we can have it, but, we're not going to eat bizcochitos every day.
Nobody's going to eat just one.
No.
Either.
So see, again, when we were kids, my mom would make tortillas, and they were papalotes, they were huge like this, and actually it should be about a 6-inch tortilla, And so, you know, we've gotten to eat those kind of foods since we're small. So we were overworking our pancreas already at that time. You know, the potatoes, you know, that's a poor man's food. Los mexicanos, los latinos, you know, los frijoles, the rice, the beans, you know, tortillas, you know, los fideos, you know, all those turn into sugar. And then another thing that's cultural, and the reason I speak the experience is my father would always tell me, guárdame la naranja that's soft. And I would say, why, Dad? He says, because it's sweeter. And you know, and so many people ask me, how come you always stress fresh? Because it's better for you. You get all the fiber, the vitamins, versus cuando ya está pasado, you know, it's very concentrated, it's sweet. It's sweeter. So if you look at dehydrated fruit, you can actually see the crystal of the sugar. It's highly concentrated sugar. Same way with the plátanos. A lot of Latinos like the plátanos get a little bit black because they're sweeter. And they think it's still healthy, it's a banana, but really it's not.
Growing up in big city, we would travel down to Mexico to visit my grandma and visit, you know, family. And we would always find ourselves with a little bit of money, and we would run to the convenience store. And this convenience store was loaded up with sugar, tamarindos, I mean, the different kinds of candies, cookies,
yes, I remember.
just loaded up. And you know, it literally was catering to the kids, because they had a section, it was almost a small section for, you know, for milk and, you know, flour for the adults, but, you know, catering to children. And then over time, I saw in the neighborhood in Houston that convenience stores started moving in, and they were featuring a lot of the similar products that were featured in Mexico. So what this tells me is there is no escape for children and for adults from these dangerous sugars that are out there. And you see a lot of fast food restaurants, a lot of places that have these high sugar items that are targeted at children. And so why do we even wonder why there's an obesity problem?
Right, exactly. And why there's diabetes and hypertension, you know, because, you know, the food industry, you know, like I always tell patients, we want everything now supersized, you know, and I say that's not good. Coke has so much sugar in it, and, you know, it's very cheap. I remember, because, you know, like you said, you went to Mexico, we went to Palomas, because there, I mean, you could buy a whole case of Coke very, very cheap, you know, because that was the drink to go with the Latinos, la soda, the Coke. But it's very high in sugar, you know, and I always tell patients, everything, you can still have those candies, but in moderation. You're not going to eat like 10 of them like we used to when we were kids. And now you got to educate him. If you're going to have any candy, it's going to be 1 or 2. You know, that's all you can have. You know, because I mean, you would go. I remember in the store with a nickel, and you could buy all this penny candy. You know, all sugar. You know, and then we were all bouncing off the wall. You know, because we were so hyper with that sugar. It was all that energy. You know, so like I say, everything is going to have to be in moderation. And of course, you know, the candy industry is going to target the kids, because the first thing kids want is candy, los dulces, you know. And
it just seems, you know, comparing convenience stores, you compare some convenience stores in inner city neighborhoods versus non-inner city neighborhoods. And you look at the convenience stores down in Mexico that have this. It just seems that, again, there's got to be a high level of education,
right,
and to teach a child to be moderate and not always go after the candy at the convenience store, to pick something healthy.
Pick something
and
healthy.
The likelihood that a child is going to do that is very low.
Right.
And I would imagine if you keep trying, something good might come out of it.
Will come out of it, yes. Yeah, because see, a lot of us, the lifestyle we grew up in, you know, and a lot of times, you know, when we're growing up, you know, we were on our own. We were on the bikes and everything, you know, in the bicicletas, and, you know, we have a nickel and we stop at the store and we buy a payday or whatever, and it's all sugar. You know, we buy a soda and we all split it up and drink this, you know. Our parents never really told us, you know, that all that's not good. You know, we ate it and they thought it was fine, you know. I think more and more young families are finding out, you know, this isn't good. You know, they're telling the kids, no, you can't have that. Yes, you can have that candy, but you're only going to have it after you eat your food, and you're only going to have one lollipop. And, you know, we wanted 3 or 4 lollipops. That's what we ate, you know. So I think now this generation is getting themselves educated more and more, and awareness that they have to be careful with consuming all that sugar.
And again, you know, in my family, I have seen them getting away from serving sodas at dinner,
Right.
you know, and serving water, and you know, doing that. And again, it's just one step at a time. And you know, one of the things I think about is how we live on the borderland, and that presents many challenges, I would imagine, as it relates to diabetes. What are some of those challenges?
Well, you know, one of the things, of course, all these little tratamientos that they can go and get in Juarez. Well, you know, my aunt went over there and this doctor gave her this licuado that made out of piña and all this kind of stuff to help her with diabetes, or they went over there and they found a yarvita that supposedly helped, you know. So they go over there. And because of proximity to the border, it's very readily they go across to see if they can find a cure to their diabetes, because they don't want to be afraid of what this disease is going to do them, you know. So again, you know, it's easier for them to go across the border because they do use a lot of more herbs and whatnot, yarvitas and all this.
Which is traditional, by the way.
Oh, yes.
It's very traditional.
Yes, very traditional.
In the culture to use different herbs.
Right.
However, you know, there is no cure for diabetes.
No, there isn't. No, and that's where education comes in. We tell them, yeah, you know, well, I went over there because my cuñado said they just helped, or my cuñada, and you know, and I tried it, but I thought it helped for a while, but I guess it didn't, you know, because they don't want to face the fact that they now have a chronic disease, you know. And of course, because again, in the proximity of Mexico, they can go and get all these from these curanderas over there, you know, and they can tell them, oh yeah, you can buy this pastilla and this supplement, you know. And I always tell them, you know what, if you're on medication here, you better make sure that it's not going to be contraindicated with the medications you're taking here, you know. Or a lot of them won't even want to buy the medication. They'll go to the Juarez and buy those yarvitas, or they're taking this té that supposedly helps with diabetes, you know. And so, you know, again, it's cheaper. It's cheaper for them to go across.
And that's one of the bigger challenges, is that
Right.
it is cheaper
Right.
than having to buy medication. But again, looking at the road to let them know insulin is not cheap, you know, and you can't cure yourself through some of these medications. They might be able to help temporarily,
Right.
but long term is what we're looking at.
Right, because if they're not really taking control of it, this disease is going to progress. It's going to progress. And finally, you know, it's just going to be where now they're really in trouble. But yet, because in the early start, they were taking these yarvitas and all these supplements from over there across the border that supposedly were helping them, but yet at the same time, they were slowly progressing and getting to those complications of diabetes, you know. And then they finally come in and they say, well, over there they gave me this pastilla and they said it was supposed to help, and all these yarvitas, these té and all these, you know. And now they're at a different level now with now they are full-blown diabetic patient, and now they have complications, and sometimes the only way we can lower their blood sugars is with insulin, which they did not want, and now they're at that stage where they need insulin. And like I always tell them, you know, it could be that once you get under control, you might not need the insulin anymore, but right now you do need the insulin, you know. A lot of times, a lot of the myth with Latinos, it's habit forming. Insulin is a habit forming, and I say no, it's not. Our body produces insulin. The pancreas produces it, but right now it's not producing enough, like type 2s, and right now you need help with insulin. And it could be that once you get under your control, you're eating again the proper portions, and you're exercising, that chances are you might not need the insulin and be able to go back to just the pills, the diet control and the pills. So with type 2, it can fluctuate. Now, like I tell them, if you have major surgery, those kind of things, you go to the hospital, they're going to take your oral pills out and they're going to give you an insulin, because insulin will lower your sugar real fast. I mean, you give a shot of Novolog, one of those rapid-acting insulin, it's going to lower the sugar real fast to avoid infections and prolonged hospitalization. So once you explain that, a lot of times the patient says, okay, yeah, so it's not, I'm not going to get hooked on it. I say, no, you won't be hooked on it. You're not going to be a drug addict, with it.
Well, I mean, speaking of hooked, concerns for purchasing this product, insulin, have got to really worry some of these low-income patients. And,
Right.
How accessible is insulin to somebody without health insurance?
You know what? There is insulins through the Walmart program that they can get that's affordable, like the regular insulin, the NPH, and the they can get those insulins, the intermittent insulin, the regular insulin, at a very low cost. They still need a prescription, so they'll know how much to take, but it's not as expensive as the current medications like Novolog, Humalog, Lantus, and Levemir. Now, some of these companies do have some assistance programs, but again, a lot of times these patients will not qualify because they're not actually citizens here. But if they're residents, they will qualify. And again, it all depends on their income. They'll have to do some paperwork. The doctor will have to submit some paperwork also for them to be able to be qualified for these assisted programs. But there is assisted programs out there for some of these patients. But if they don't have no insurance, then there's these other resources that they can tap into.
There are multiple generations of Latinos living in this country. What barriers does language play in the borderland in trying to work in educating them? I mean, does SNMDO have Spanish speakers to help with this?
Yes, of course, I'm one of them. The other diabetes educator that works with type 1, she's also bilingual, and she's a school nurse. And yes, we can work with them. Now, the thing is that some of these older generations, they don't read and write. So we have to use pictures. And so a lot of the materials that we have pictures, because they'll understand the pictures. Because a lot of times when we would see patients where I worked before, we'd go in and see the patient, and they'd be looking at you, and you look at, and then real shyly they say, no puedo leer. Or a lot of them also can speak English, but they'll say, I don't read English, I need it in Spanish. But they can understand it, but they can't read it in English. So, and then that's you go, oh, okay. So if the doctor writes a prescription in English, he needs to be aware, or she needs to be aware that he speaks English, but he doesn't read it. He can speak it, but he doesn't read it. So that prescription and those instructions need to be in Spanish. But then some of the older ones, they'll tell you, I don't read. I can't read. So then you have to use pictures to educate them.
What goals does SNMDO have as far as reaching Latinos in our community?
You know what? We started this right now. The program that I'm involved in, of course, is providing diabetes education out to the community. And I know that's already been requested about us going further out into the county and helping out the other centers. Of course, that it's a nonprofit organization, so of course that says that we need some funding to help that, because again, getting diabetes educators out in the county, they would have to be bilingual, because you're working with that population of people out there. And sometimes it's hard to get educators that are bilingual and understand diabetes and able to teach out there. So I think that the future is that hopefully we'll be able to extend. Yes, we're doing it here within our community, but also to be able to help out the outer community centers also with diabetes.
Do you have any success stories that you can tell us of somebody that you met and has diabetes under control now?
Actually, yes. Recently, yes. I mean, since I started working with Southern New Mexico, I've had patients that, in fact, a Hispanic gentleman that only spoke Spanish that was sent to us from one of the clinics, and that he didn't understand his insulin, he didn't understand how he was to control it or whatnot. So they asked me, can you meet with him? And so I did. I reviewed with him the diet, I reviewed his insulin that he was on. I told him, explained to him, he was taking his insulin after a meal and it's supposed to be before a meal. So I explained to him the importance of how this insulin is supposed to be taken before a meal, not after, and why he's supposed to take it before. Well, make long story short, I gave him all that information, and then I followed up with him. About 3 days later, I called him and asked him how I identify myself, and I said, oh yes, I know who you are, yo se lo conozco. Y le dije, ¿cómo está haciendo? And he said, I am doing better. Well, let me tell you, by the end of the month, he came and he said, I'm doing fantastic.
Well, TJ, thank you very much for joining us here on Fronteras and Changing America. I'm Edmundo Resendez.